Hello and welcome to the Future of Cities, your exclusive look at the inspiring mission, key learnings, and incredible solutions we've been working with over the course of our latest collaborative. My name is Adam Straker, Program Manager here at Communitech, and I will be your trusty guide throughout this session. The Future of Cities brings together innovators with a common goal of reimagining the systems and processes that guide the operations of cities. Working with a variety of stakeholders, Future of Cities explores solutions to the most pressing challenges while making sure consideration is given to the privacy and security of citizens. Our current challenge is to support Region of Waterloo's inspirational vision to make Waterloo Region the benchmark community in Canada for child and youth wellbeing. Following an extended period of stakeholder engagement and problem discovery and definition with members of the Waterloo Region Children and Youth Planning Table, or CYPT for short, we launched a call for innovation in which we invited tech startups to submit proposals for how they would address and solve 4 challenges relating to data. These challenges included data sharing. Having access to data from external organizations to complement internal data is a critical component of an organization's ability to develop insights on their programs and services. Benchmarks and comparables. CYPT member organizations seek comparables to comparables and benchmarks as a way of measuring the efficacy of their programs and services. Data literacy and capabilities. CYPT organizations are experiencing challenges in keeping up with the never-ending changes in technology. Solutions that do the heavy lifting in terms of data collection, analysis, and visualization could increase capacity and enable organizations to make the most of their resources. And finally, common approach to data and insights. Every organization differs in how they collect, retain, analyze, and report on their activities and community engagements. This presents a significant challenge when trying to collaborate on program engagement, community insights, data sharing, or fundraising. This call for innovation, in which we asked Canadian tech startups how they would solve one or more of these challenges, yielded 16 submissions from 8 different companies with a cornucopia of cutting-edge technologies, some of which we'll see later in the event. A key learning from this is that there are many ways of solving what are ostensibly quite specific problems. As my fellow Brits, or at least this Brit, likes to say, there's more than one way to skin a rabbit. Selected companies were invited to present to collaborative partner contacts, innovation experts, and most important of all, the potential end users themselves, their vision for how they might address one or more of these initiatives. Initiative 1 was the CYPT Youth Impact Survey, a platform or data portal for the sharing of data in accessible and visual ways, including comparables to provincial and national data. And Initiative 2 was the Wellbeing Shared Measurement Database, a secure process or platform to automate tool and data collection and sharing. Stay tuned for an exploration of some of the very important lessons we learned from this process and amazing presentations from 5 of the startups we met along the way. But before we get into all that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our lead partner, Region of Waterloo, associate lead partners, WSIB Ontario, and contributor partners, City of Kitchener, Edgeworth Box, Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation, and United Way Waterloo Region Communities. Thank you all for your support and leadership in this unique and special initiative. In a few short moments, we'll be hearing from Smart Waterloo Region's Grayson Bass in a tone-setting baby keynote. Building further on the ideas Grayson will be exploring is our cross-sector panel featuring speakers from government, not-for-profit, and private enterprise. Then we'll be having our founder showcase, in which we'll learn more about some of the companies that propose solutions to our data challenges. You may find some of them surprising. You will find all of them wonderful. Really, you've got to see this. We will then take a look at the future of cities before our Founder Connect networking segment. Your chance to connect with our partners, founders, and each other. Stick around for more conversation and connection than you can shake a virtual stick at. But let's put our sticks down for a second and talk about our next speaker. So I was scrolling around on LinkedIn a few weeks ago and came across a post from our next speaker in which he said that the only true sustainable competitive advantage is compassion. I just love this as it really exemplifies the spirit of our collaborative and in particular, the conversation we're about to have. Indeed, Grayson Bass is recognized for his ability to unlock innovation through compassion, his ability to safely navigate and operate in chaotic environments, and through disruptive change. He is a trusted advisor to individuals, companies, and governments faced with uncertainty, a very useful talent right now. Grayson has worked with companies involved in energy, IT, private equity, international trade, manufacturing, agriculture, licensing of intellectual property, research and development, socially responsible business, and education. A native Texan and global nomad, when Grayson is not at home in Toronto, you can find him in different parts of the world, seeking out innovative ideas and having conversations with interesting people. He researches networks and social impact measurement and has a passion for social justice and economic empowerment. He's the founding lab manager of Smart Water Region Innovation Lab and teaches applied innovation at various colleges and universities. Dear audience, I never know what Grayson is going to say, but it's always good. So let's hand him the stage and enjoy. Grayson, over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Adam. A baby keynote sounds fun. I was looking for a filter that turned me into a talking baby, but I couldn't find that. Maybe that's a product or feature Zoom can implement. I want to thank first and foremost the Children and Youth Planning Table. I want to thank Communitech in the Future of Cities, but I think it's important to acknowledge that the challenges here have been addressed and have been looked at by membership and by the Children and Youth Planning Table for a lot longer than any of us have been here. And I think that that goes to speak to part of the innovativeness of trying to create a challenge around Future of Cities that brings together the nonprofit sector with the for-profit, and particularly with startups, because that is an inherently difficult challenge. It's difficult on for a lot of different reasons, but as Adam said, there's a really good reason for that to happen. And the reason is that compassion really unlocks the door to innovation and to change. I have taught innovation around the world. I've worked with a lot of different companies. I have come to believe a few things that are unequivocally true. And the first one is that the only sustainable business model is human empowerment. I think that there's a lot of research to show, and I think if you look at any of the large companies today, particularly tech companies, they do something which is extend human behavior. They make existing human behaviors more accessible to more people. And that is a form of empowerment. When we look at the challenges that our community faces, particularly those amongst children and youth, if we start to approach that as how would we empower these individuals? This is a principle in some ways of community co-design, so that we're not designing for a community, but designing with a community. That starts to become a tool to unlock a lot of value, socially, economically, and for government. Of course, we think that's fantastic. But for all of us humans, that makes a better community. That's a community that's more resilient, able to withstand sudden shocks, whether it's pandemics that appear and continue, whether it is challenges related to climate, whether that's challenges related to how we discourse in public. All of these, I believe, we can solve with what I believe is the next fundamental truth, that the only sustainable competitive advantage is compassion. Compassion is not empathy. It's certainly not sympathy or pity. That may start you on the road there, but compassion, we find, is something that is innate in everyone. But for some reason, we learn maybe not to be so compassionate, or we don't understand that compassion can be not only a tool, but a platform for business to grow and to expand. We look at how we find breakthrough innovation. And some of what we find is that if anyone comes to tell you that, say that they're doing something disruptive or they have a breakthrough innovation, we can quickly assess if that's true. The first one is it based on some type of emerging and sustaining trends? So we know climate will be a source of breakthrough innovation, because we know that this is a trend that continues to evolve, and that the opportunity to address the challenges, whether that's adaptation or if we're able to actually address it root cause and begin to fix it, is the source for a entire new universe of innovation. When we look at the emerging challenges, both from the pandemic, but which already existed around mental health and well-being, we see that there's going to be huge amounts of an opportunity for breakthrough innovation. Just to give some context and examples. What we also see is that some type of breakthrough innovation comes from new types of business models. So it's not just about how would you deliver these types of services as you've always been, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, but how do you start to look at that problem and start to combine business models or start to do things in a different way? Do you offer at a different time, a different place? Is it a different type of logistics involved? Do you actually expand your service or focus more precisely on someone? These are all things that we find that has to change to put that ingredient into breakthrough. And when we think about this, there also tends to be some type of business model. There has to be an economic model. Whether you're a for-profit or you're a nonprofit, there's got to be an economic solution that makes sense. I believe that even if we don't have short-term, which is cause for a lot of problem, economic sense, that long-term, we will always find. And we know this for a fact, which is the fourth ingredient, is that it does address basic human needs, which is why innovation, given a long enough time horizon, is a social cause. It emerges from the edge, from the fringe, from people who are furthest from opportunity, from communities that don't have a voice, but they're doing something just to survive. And that survival instinct is so powerful that it starts to change how we view the world. You know, I think as we start to go down this road and as we did this challenge, we could see where there were gaps in understanding between the for-profit side and startups and the nonprofit side. But I think that that is why this initiative was kind of a success, because we can learn to do something better. We learn to be able to see what we can do, how we can work together, communicate, what it means to adapt to the ways that we work together. And eventually, we're going to get to a place where we solve and empower humans and do so in a way that's far more compassionate and able to create a world that's much better. You know, I like to tell people I'm only interested in problems that affects children and youth. My vision is that we have a region that is the best community for children and youth. That's what I inherited as a mission. And the way that I see that is that a 3-year-old should be able to walk out their door, get into we hope, a green autonomous vehicle, travel anywhere in the region to go to a program, and make it home for dinner on time, safe and sound. And that's viewed as normal. There are people, both paid and just general members of the community, that are able to help that child navigate, and that child has the ability to grow and learn and live in a safe, healthy environment without the types of stress that we put on them today. I think that that is 100% possible. And I think that that is what I know to be true, is that human response to challenges, whether it's COVID, but specifically around climate, we know that as bad as it can get, human civilization improves and increases in leaps and bounds as a response to that challenge. So I think this is a very hopeful stage that we're in. We have the ability, and we have a group of people who clearly are invested in solving challenges that the nonprofit and the social sector takes. And I would like to challenge everyone, whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit, find one single service that you can innovate on that improves the lives and well-being of children and youth. If you can do that, I've got a lot of time for you. I'll turn it back over to Adam. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the rest of the panel. Be well and be safe, everyone.
Grayson, thank you for that. A few things that I noted from your remarks there. I like the idea of there being gaps between profit and not-for-profit. That this initiative showed how we can do something better and get to a place where we can empower humans with compassion and create a better world. I also like the idea of the partnership between enterprise and not-for-profits of addressing these seemingly unsurmountable challenges for human civilization, and that sets the tone nicely for our panel discussion. So not-for-profits deliver vital services and resources to our most vulnerable communities. They do so tirelessly and often with limited resources. In an increasingly complex world, the challenges not-for-profits face are also becoming increasingly complex. And there's a growing need to replace existing and legacy systems with new technologies that will not only support their mandates, but dramatically increase their capacity and therefore their ability to serve communities. Tech-driven startup companies exist on the bleeding edge of innovation. Their solutions are designed to address and solve complex problems, but it can be difficult to find opportunities to test and scale these solutions in a live environment. These challenges seem disparate, but what if there was a way for them to solve each other? What if early stage startups could help address and solve problems for not-for-profits? And what if not-for-profits became early adopters of the latest technologies, providing startups with a unique go-to-market strategy and an opportunity to validate and scale their solutions? It's a very compelling idea, but can it be done? What are the challenges and how can we solve them? Well, we have four wonderful panelists to help us find out, and I'll introduce them now. Alison Pearson moved to Waterloo Region in 1997 to complete her undergraduate and Masters of Community Psychology from Wilfrid Laurier University. She passionately pursued learning in the areas of prevention, effective group process, and child and youth and family health and well-being. She has settled permanently in the community with her husband and two children and loves being able to support various community members to work together with the shared goal of improving child and youth well-being. She has supported the Children and Youth Planning Table of Waterloo Region, or earlier iterations of this collaborative, since 2005, and is currently the manager. She is also on the leadership team for Smart Waterloo Region. Amanda Melnick is the Senior Director, Impact and Stewardship at United Way Waterloo Region Communities. She oversees United Way's investments into local community and collaborative partnerships. As part of her role, Amanda works to build relationships and connections with the community, helping to show the impact of generous donations given to United Way. She believes wholeheartedly that no matter the size of our actions, we can all make a positive difference in the lives of those around us, but together we can make the biggest impact of all. Prior to her current role, Amanda led the philanthropy team at United Way WRC, helping individuals and businesses from all sectors learn about and make a difference in their community. She has an undergraduate degree from the University of Waterloo and a Master's Business Administration from Wilfrid Laurier University. In her spare time, Amanda enjoys spending time with her partner John and two-year-old daughter Finley, with whom everything is a new and exciting adventure. Chand Soran is a Canadian entrepreneur based in New York. A former officer in the Royal Canadian Navy, he spent close to 20 years working in capital markets, including making markets and foreign exchange derivatives and investing as a hedge fund analyst and portfolio manager focused on special situations. He invested in and subsequently joined as COO at B Corp, selling technology as a service to US correctional facilities. Chand then launched Edgeworth Box, a platform for sourcing, including technology from startups. Edgeworth Box has partnered with Communitech to advance the Future Of program. He is a graduate of the Royal Military College of Canada, Queen's University, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Jessica Rowley is the co-founder and head of growth at Tiet. Over the years, Jessica has won various awards, including the 2018 Entrepreneur of the Year Award and the 2020 Woman of Excellence Award. She is also passionate about giving back to the entrepreneurship community and volunteers her time as a mentor for women entrepreneurs for the Ella program at York University and mentors and teaches youth at Y2 Entrepreneurship Labs. Panelists, welcome and thank you for joining us. We have some questions to run through and some discussion to have. So let's get straight to it. Well, as straight as we can. Maybe Alison, let's start with you. Given your experience working with many not-for-profits across Waterloo Region, perhaps you can share some of the specific challenges you have seen related to the not-for-profit sector engaging with startups, and also what startups need to do better to engage with not-for-profits.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Adam. And hello, everyone. I wish I could see the folks around this Zoom call, but I'm glad to be here. As was introduced, I hold the manager seat on the Children and Youth Planning Table Backbone team, which is a community collaborative in Waterloo Region of about 60 organizations serving children, youth, and families. I use the pronouns of she and her, and today I am joining you from the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. And I would like to take a moment and thank all the knowledge holders and all the wisdom that has been shared with me as I've been on my own journey to learn about my ancestry and identity as a settler and where I'm situated. So your question, Adam, was about challenges. So as mentioned, there's many different organizations that sit around the CYPT table. And the first challenge I think I'll name is trust. So what I have observed and noticed is I get the privilege of supporting folks who are on the ground, directly connected to young people. They are experts when it comes to well-being of young people, of youth, children. And they're very keenly aware of how technology in the past or current day can get in the way of well-being. And I think when you don't have experience necessarily connecting to tech partners, the tech sector, it's very, very easy to make assumptions or blanket statements about where might work go with partners. Might it compromise the well-being? Might it be about the technology itself and not the well-being of the young people? So knowing that that challenge exists, and I think through our time creating the Smart Cities proposal in our community, did a world of good in helping to dispel some of those beliefs and concerns. And at the same time, it's important to know that that is a thread that runs underneath. It's going to be something people are keenly attuned to watching for. And so as a startup or a tech partner coming into the space, naming that can be helpful. Naming how you value the on-the-ground knowledge of the partners that you might seek to work with in terms of what they know about well-being for young people and families. And then I think Grayson made a point in his baby keynote about the humanness. And anytime that you can relate to the problem as a human or the challenge as a human, I think starts to build bridges instantly between whether you're in the not-for-profit space or in the startup space. Which leads me to a second challenge, and I apologize for this heteronormative example, but the men are from Mars, women are from Venus concept. If we think about this sort of idea of two different groups that have maybe two different languages, two different cultures, two different styles or work of pacing, for example, I think sometimes that can be a challenge because either whether it's real or perceived, there's this notion that maybe the not-for-profit space is moving a bit slower and the startup tech space is moving faster. And so how do you bridge that? Or how do you have conversation when the terminology that you're using or the reference points you're making are not familiar to the other group of folks that you're trying to engage with? So being really intentional about maybe acronyms that you're using, examples that you're using, and recognizing that I'm probably going to say something that's not as familiar to you. And so let's build in space to have conversation so that understanding can be achieved, I think is helpful. And the final challenge I'll name is what we would all be keenly aware of is the stress the system is under as we hit the year 2 mark of this pandemic. We have a system of not-for-profits that are in a lot of ways survival mode. They are trying to meet the growing and more complex needs of families and young people on the ground. They're trying to do this with perhaps staffing that's been compromised, funding that's been compromised, and figuring out how to get needs served day to day is very much where a lot of energy is going. And so if engagement with startup and tech partners is about what could be, what is the future, what is the looking up and seeing what is the potential, just right now, the reality is that can be really difficult for some folks to feel like they've got the bandwidth for that or the mental space for that. So I think that's the 3 that I'm going to touch on, Adam.
Excellent, thank you. So maybe Jessica will head to you next. So as the vendor on this panel, especially one that's worked with not-for-profits, public and private companies, can you speak to your experience between these sectors and give some advice for not-for-profits on how they can improve the way they can work with tech startups like TIAT?
Absolutely, and Allison hit on a lot of good challenges, all that we've encountered with working with nonprofits, municipalities, and other public sector. And what we found is, especially with the private companies, not to put a stereotype on it, but a lot of the individuals working for those private companies are a little bit more, have a more innovative mindset, I'm going to call it, to the point where they know what they want and they're going to go and seek it out, right? So that's where they reach out to startups and things like that, and they understand that just because we're not a giant organization or conglomerate, the smaller guys or the mid-sized organizations might still have the solutions they're looking for. And with public sectors and non-for-profits, so far we found that there's usually one or two individuals on the team that have that innovative mindset, and we call them our champions, right? So we work with those champions to not really go against their colleagues, but try and convince their colleagues that, hey, there are solutions out there. They're not just a choice between one and two. We could look elsewhere. We could look to see what's coming out in the future, because there are a lot of individuals in those nonprofit or government spaces that, I'm going to just call it, kind of have like an old school way of thinking, or they get really comfortable with their day-to-day functionality. They get really comfortable with knowing how to do something. And let's be honest, I mean, change is something that not everybody is comfortable with, right? We have to get used to that. We have to jump over those hurdles. And so I find that a lot of our process of working with these nonprofits and government organizations, there's a lot of that convincing happening, which does slow down the process, because we're just trying to convince and show them what we've done and what we've done with others, and trying to convince that just because we're growing or we're scaling, we can still help you. And leveraging the partnerships and the relationships we've built with partners like Communitech and others have just been so incredibly helpful with giving us that pathway or opening to nonprofit space, because it's like, hey, we've got this whole group of potential startups or potential scaling companies that could be an option for you. So that's been like absolutely amazing for us for growing our company, is leveraging those partnerships. So in terms of your question, Adam, in terms of my advice to nonprofits, I guess it would be just keep an open mind, that there are different ways to do things that you might be comfortable with doing. And that, some of us, the startup, the tech companies, have also listened to your challenges. And so that's why we've come up with solutions, right? So we've heard challenges from other individuals in the industry. And so some of the stuff that we've built could possibly work for you. Just give us a chance to show you.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very good point, and you make a very good point about listening, because that's fundamental to what we're doing here. This is, if anything else, is an expression and achievement of emotional intelligence. But I think it's important to get to have the systems in place that will enable to the connecting tissue, I think, between not-for-profits and between private enterprise. I think this program has managed to uncover, but is still absent in the general public domain. So maybe this is where we can pick Chand's brain on this. So Chand, you've been helping connect organizations with vendors across many industries, and this has been through your platform. When it comes to sourcing, what advice would you give to both not-for-profits and startups who are each looking to connect and build those partnerships, build those connections, establish what Jessica described, that emotional intelligence, that listening, and what needs to be done to streamline and optimize the sourcing process?
Oh, there's a lot that needs to be done to streamline the sourcing process. But sourcing is a kind of scary word. People throw it around. Procurement is another term that people talk about, proofs of concept. But if you really break it down, the problem that we're trying to solve here is just a matching problem. And there's plenty of matching problems in everyday life. Dating, for example, is a matching problem. But in this specific case, we are looking for what we call problem solution supplier fit, right? So the buyer here, the nonprofits, are looking to find the right solution delivered by the right supplier at the right price, so that we optimize the fit. And we also have to understand, and I think Jessica made this pretty clear, is that we exist in very dynamic times, and we want to be where the puck is going to be. We don't want to just buy something that is where the puck is currently, if I can stretch that metaphor. And one of the things that keeps coming up in everybody's remarks is, put another way, the pre-existence of assumptions by everyone about what we're trying to do here. So the nonprofits have assumptions about what the startups and innovators are thinking and what they're like. The startups and the innovators have assumptions about what the nonprofits are like. And it's almost as if they're speaking different languages, that one is speaking Greek and one is speaking French. And within that, there's even more assumptions because everyone has assumptions about what the problem is. And the key to actually getting to where we want to be, where we've picked the right solution for the right problem from the right supplier, is to really break down those assumptions and to start speaking in the same language. And if we can do that, then to Grayson's point, then we can be specifically compassionate and we can act in regards to that compassion. And so, so for example, you might have a buyer who's looking for innovation, and they will think, okay, this is what the solution will look like. And they will start to describe the solution, but in doing so, they limit themselves and they restrict the number of counterparties with whom they might deal, instead of talking about the outcome that they seek to obtain in procuring this innovation to begin with. And so this has actually been a very interesting project because it's exploded the problem. Normally, there are differences and there's a chasm to cross between buyers and suppliers of innovation. But here it is far more pronounced because of the nature of this project, right? So nonprofits, and typically, localized nonprofits like we've dealt with here in this Regional Water Loop project, don't have a terrific amount of experience buying innovation. And so they are relatively novice in this, and commensurately, the startups have less experience with these smaller nonprofits as well. So I think the way to and what we saw here clearly, and this is affirmed by the language that others have already used, is that communication is the solve to dissolving these assumptions and getting at the core of what we want to achieve with this specific sourcing exercise. So that if one side is speaking Greek and the other side is speaking French, potentially we can start all speaking English and discussing the problem, on a common context. I think the other thing is that, and this happens in every sourcing event that we see, is that people become possessed by the formality of it, right? And they think, oh, I have to do things in a certain way. Well, the truth is that they don't have to do things in a specific way. And in fact, if we can deformalize the structure of the conversation, we can actually get to the heart of these assumptions. And then we can drill down to the actual issues about which we want to be properly and actively compassionate. And so what we need to have, in addition to a common language, is a framework where we can discuss without any inhibitions these things. And so I think all of those things appear to have occurred in an organic fashion in this project. So we were thrilled to be part of it. And thank you for having us.
Thanks, Chan. Yeah, I think you touched on some really interesting points there. I think the bridging the language gap is so important, and also I think there is there is a case of everyone does this. People make assumptions about the solution, about the problems that they have, and the solutions to those problems, or what they might look like, and in doing so, they might overlook some ideas or some options or some opportunities that would be very salient. And I think we've seen this with this collaborative, right? We sent out some data challenges, and what we got back was not what we were expecting at all. I mean, we got some very data focused solutions, and they were amazing. But we also got some really out of left field stuff that I don't think anyone would have thought about. And so I think maybe we can touch upon that in a bit. But just before,
I just want to add, that is the mark of a successful sourcing event. If you cannot forecast what's going to come out of the other end, if you're surprised positively by what has happened, if you've generated sufficient options and engagement. So yes, absolutely a big success here.
Yeah, and that's just it. We saw the demos being presented to the members of the CYPT, and I think a lot of these technologies went from being quite abstract to being something that was directly applicable to the to what these people all wanted to achieve. We saw it in the chat. These excited conversations around, oh, this means we could do this and this. And I think for the first time there was it was something that was taken from being abstract, from being nebulous, and being directly applicable. And so I just think in that small case that that happened. But any thoughts on how the secret sauce to making that to kind of achieving that en masse, or achieving that across in a more sustainable, more broad way?
I think the key is you want to attract as many responsive proposals as possible, so that you have options from which you can choose, right? So the typical, sourcing process is so stilted and formal and off-putting, and in a sense, unnecessarily complicated and expensive, that it discourages people from participating. So whatever you can do, first of all, to encourage people to participate is key. The second thing is to cast as wide a net as possible in terms of inviting people to take a look at the problem. And I think the third thing is to provide them with a technology that's inviting and familiar, almost like a consumer application, not to toot my own horn here, but that enables them to just forget that they're participating in what might ostensibly be this formal process, but looks so consumer-like that they just start engaging with one another. And so it's like a grade 6 school dance where you try to get the wallflowers out in the middle of the floor before they realize that they're actually dancing with a girl or a boy or whatever. So.
Yeah, I like that. I always like the the kind of the grade 6 disco. Everyone's sitting on the side, feeling very, very awkward about things, and it just takes one person, right, to get up and start. It's usually an attempted dance rather than dance itself. I don't think that's ever a properly.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it takes. Amanda, so the United Way supports many organizations through funding programs. How do funding organizations like United Way consider capital investments in technology as part of not-for-profits operations? And what are the elements of a successful business case for these types of investments? And also, what could startups do to help not-for-profits get the funding they need to adopt their solutions? Questions there.
That's okay. I'm gonna. So United Way invests $1 million every year into the community, into our local community here in Waterloo Region. We're also a fundraiser, so we work to raise money and work with donors all the time. So I'm going to speak to it a bit as a funder and a donor, because nonprofits I know, and charities, you're going to be looking for sources to fund this work from. It could be a donor or it could be a funder. Definitely don't just think that this is the only avenue to be successful at getting something like this funded is through a formal funding process. You may be able to find donors that would fund this as well. So for us, we have a general operating stream of support, which is really important because we know that investing in the organization itself and the capabilities of that organization is important, because the better run the organization is, the better outcomes the programs will have. And I think that we're seeing a bit of a shift there in terms of funders and funding attitudes. You may not have shifted as much as we'd like at this point, but there has been conversations. I know I've been having conversations with other funders just recently about that, and around the concept of kind of trust-based philanthropy and trusting organizations to put the money where it's needed, because typically in your granting or funding streams with different funders, it can be very narrow to what folks want and need to apply to, and stuff like this may not fit. And that is definitely a challenge, because nonprofits and charities work on shoestring budgets, and it can be hard to find the resources to put towards a very needed improvement in technology, but you're kind of hamstringed. Is that going to go towards our clients and people who need this support and our staff, or does it go to investing into the organization? So it's yeah, there's very it's very difficult decisions to be made, and as funders And we need to be making that choice a little bit easier by doing things like offering general operating grants for this purpose. In terms of what a startup could do to help with these sorts of applications, absolutely helping to tell that story. So one thing to always remember when you're doing a grant, you're talking to people, and this is being read by people. So to be able to convey the impact that an investment in a new technology can have, it'll go a long way. And like Jessica said, talking about kind of coming together in that communication piece and helping nonprofits to really kind of understand, well, where could this take you? I think that's where we need some help. Because I know through this initiative, my eyes were opened to different possibilities that I didn't think about that just seems, I think if I talk to Jessica about it, she's like, oh yeah, that's easy, that's simple, that's no big deal. But thinking of it through the my own lens, it's like, that's incredible. Like that's 20 years down the road in our business plan. Like I didn't think that we could do it now. So it's helping each other along there and helping to be able to articulate what the possibilities are and what it'll truly cost. I think that that's a perception that we need help kind of getting over, is that maybe it's not as much as we think it's going to be able to get to kind of that point and to be able to invest and use some of this technology to move us so much farther forward than we are now. Oh, you're on mute, Adam.
Thank you. Oh, I was just about to open up to the floor for questions from our wonderful audience, and I see we already have a question from Stephen Ayer. Do you have any examples of things you thought were 20 years down your business plan that was simpler than you thought?
Well, I think that this is probably a number of you can commiserate with if you're a nonprofit, but for our database, I feel like is actually from the 80s. It looks, it feels exactly like that, and we're just kind of going, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what we're using, we're making it work. This was maybe a 10-year, we got it 10 years ago or so. So not expecting to change that anytime soon, for one, because we not sure, investing in that seems like such a big thing to do. But then going through this process and realizing, just seeing some of the solutions being presented, just how kind of simple and streamlined they were, it just was a bit surprising to me. And I don't have the background in the technology world to be able to understand kind of really where we are now with some of these things. And it's not something that I've invested the time into looking into with my own organization. And we don't have a technology officer or anything like that. And then, so it takes something like this, I think, it has taken something like this to kind of open my eyes in that. And for particular, I was looking at a lens through our kind of how we house our data and how we communicate out to our stakeholders. So just the functionality would just seem light years ahead of where we are now. And I didn't think that was something we'd be able to do in this time frame.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just obviously. Okay. Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting point. And during our conversations as we were preparing for this, what I heard from you was like, sometimes it's very obvious when something's broken and when something's not working, but sometimes it's not obvious when something's not working, or when something's preventing you from achieving what you want to achieve, preventing you from having the capacity to engage with the people who matter the most, your communities. So I think it's only really when you start to see what else is on the table that you realize, well, there's a lot more that I hadn't really thought about, or maybe the problem I thought I had was actually a different problem with a different system altogether. Alison, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this as well, because I know that you've been in this process and you saw this unfold from the beginning. We heard very broad statements, like we find it challenging to demonstrate our program efficacy. We find it challenging to engage with our communities and manage the all the constraints on our resources. Is this something that you've observed as we've gone through this process?
So if I'm understanding the question you're asking, what came to be appreciated, I think, in a different way as we went through this was the challenges or the problems itself. So when we started this, and you saw in Adam's slides at the beginning, we had 4 problem statements, and those problem statements are very much centered around the challenges organizations have at an organizational level to work with their data and to share their data together, which is very in line with how we work at the CYPT, right? Like, we're thinking about, as a collective, how do we get better at making use of the information we have? But through this process, I would say the door started to open in people's thinking of, but what if there wasn't that organizational layer even? Like, what if we didn't have to rely on organizations having the best and latest ways of storing that, and the ways that, adhered to the right privacy constraints and the right platforms to share? What if that almost disappeared and there was more of this ownership piece for young people and families themselves on their data, and it flowing through into some space that, again, still have the same considerations around privacy, but also around ownership of data? And again, would it almost remove a barrier for organizations, as like Amanda's pointing to, like working with technologies that might feel outdated, or not having the people power on your team to manage the technology side of things? So that was definitely something that I think, in having the space created through this experiment with Future of Cities, we could actually spend more time like digesting and thinking about the problem, and where it actually might make really great sense to look at the barriers themselves, and they maybe weren't the barriers we initially saw.
Right. Fascinating. One other point that I wanted to touch on, going back to was around how tech startups can help not-for-profits convey convey or communicate the value of their investment. So to really just help them tell that story. And I know that storytelling was a big part of communicating program efficacy. And I don't think we've talked about that much throughout the course of the collaborative since we heard that. But Jessica, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in terms of how TIAT has worked with not-for-profits so far. Have there been aspects of the conversation where you supported their telling of the story to their communities, to their fundraisers? Has there been anything else that TIAT's working on, or is this something that you've given some thought about?
So if I understand can you repeat the question one more time in terms of?
So really, I'm just interested in hearing how TIAT communicates with the not-for-profits that it works with. Amanda mentioned about this whole enablement of not-for-profits to tell the story of the value of their investment of technology and of the value of their work. So I was wondering if this is something that TIAT has done in the past, or this is something that you're considering doing.
Yeah, I mean, we're learning every day how to adjust working with different organizations. And one of our biggest learning aspects out of this was implementation and training, in terms of like how to implement the system with nonprofits, going back to some of the earlier points in terms of, somebody might be speaking Greek and somebody might be speaking French. And so how do we kind of take that and make it into English where everyone understands it, has been a big part of it. So nonprofits sharing to us, this is the challenge we're having. Don't try and give us the solution. Let us just listen to you. We're not going to give you the solution right now, but let us just gather the challenges that you're having. Trust that we have the experience to dilute what you're trying to say and what the outcome you want, and we will present to you different options. We won't just present to you like this is the only option you have, right? Understanding that everyone's at a different pace in terms of technology. Everyone's at a different understanding of how to embrace technology and how to use it. And so that's been a big challenge for us. I mean, we've completely revamped our onboarding, our implementation, our training plan when working specifically with nonprofits, because we see that as something that we just have to be able to better offer to our clients so that they can better adopt the technology, right? Because the last thing we want is for us to gain the contract, as you know, but then have nobody using it. That's the last thing we want. And so that's why we had to really create new ways to educate, new ways to communicate, and just kind of take it from there. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a lot of this just seems to go down to kind of human interpersonal skills. Going back to Grayson's piece about compassion, communication is vital. I'd be interested to hear, and maybe this is we can kind of close on this note. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this conversation. Maybe starting with you, Jessica. What's one key point? And just bearing in mind, actually, our audience. There are startup founders. There are not-for-profits in our audience. What is one thing that you would like them to go home with in their head, or well, they're already at home mostly, but what's one thing that you would like them to have in their head or take away from this conversation?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I mean, from a startup standpoint, my advice, I guess, would be to be patient. That if this is a space that you have a solution for, that just to be patient with it and just be prepared to educate and to communicate properly. Don't just go out there assuming that the end user already knows what your solution is, because there is a big learning curve still, I find, in the nonprofit space. So just be patient on that side. And then from the nonprofit side, I would just ask just to be more open, right, to the possibilities that are out there, and just be willing to listen. So don't come into the table, like Chan said, don't come into the table knowing what your solution is. Like, just be open to listening to ideas. And that's why this initiative was so amazing, because we got to share different ideas and hopefully something stuck, but it just gave us that opportunity to share more of what we can do and how we can help, really.
Right. Interesting. Fascinating. Thank you. Chand, so for what we did here, Edgeworth Box really was the rug that tied our room together. It was what enabled us from a sourcing potential from the CYPT, and then communicate that to startup founders, and then to really just drive those submissions. So there's a connecting tissue there. And I think what this needs, emotional intelligence, listening, those soft interpersonal skills, they need something to, they need a road to travel on. They need that connectivity. So what are your closing thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I think for the perspective of the buyer, in this case, it's the nonprofits, but it could be anybody looking for an innovative solution. You want to generate as many responses that directly answer your questions and come with a novel approach to your problem as possible. And you have to do it in a way that really encourages people to let their hair down, whatever the analogy is, and to relax enough that they're willing to have a conversation with you. They're actually actively listening to you. They understand what your problem is. And if they can solve your problem, then they can, with whatever they bring to the table, then they bring that to the table. And if they can't, you want to create an environment where people that can't solve your problem say, look, I wish you all the best of luck, but I can't do it. I'm not going to force my solution on you to close some sale, because it's just not going to lead to engagement, and it's just going to lead to frustration, right? So you want to create those conditions. And then on the supplier side, I think you really want to listen to what the buyer is asking, and you want to engage in a conversation so that you go back and forth with them in a collaborative fashion. I think that's really the biggest change here in terms of the way people buy things, right? Like, I think before the pandemic, certainly there was an adversarial relationship between buyers and suppliers, where everybody they saw this as a competition or a negotiation where they didn't want to leave any crumbs on the table for anybody else. But I think the pandemic has taught us that the only people that really managed to do okay out of the pandemic were people that were collaborative, friendly, nice people that you wanted to do business, who were interested in seeing everybody at the table succeed. So that's really, I think, the takeaway is you want to create those conditions.
Wonderful, thank you. I like that a lot. I think it's an important lesson to take from the pandemic in itself. This ability to relate to each other and not just everyone out just trying to clean each other's clocks all the time. Okay, we're out of time just about. Maybe we could just have some quick thoughts from Amanda and then from Alison, and then we'll roll on to our next segment. So Amanda, any closing thoughts, any last words of advice that you would like to give to our wonderful audience members?
A couple of things. We're really fortunate in this area to be in this tech hub. We're in this incubator for all of these amazing organizations and startups that are coming up, and having things like this to participate in through Communitech. There's these organizations like Communitech that are connected into that tech sector. I know that nonprofits and charities, like Alison said, we tend to speak a different language than tech, but it's time that we really come together and collaborate. Because as he mentioned before in the opening, the issues that we're all facing right now are so much more complex, and they need different kinds of solutions. So if we can do this kind of collaboration more, to be open to it, to have people like Communitech help connect us to that and connect each other, I think that it'll really help us as a community move forward and just be open to the idea of trying new things. Like Jessica and Chan said, just come to the table open to new ideas, and yeah, maybe we'll do something great together.
Wonderful, fantastic.
Yes, Brian, it does. Yeah.
Nicely done, Brian. I like that. Alison, closing thoughts from you.
Very final. I really appreciate all these comments that the panelists have shared. I would say the power of data to be a bridge. So when we're talking about Greek, Latin, Spanish, French, that data or a statistic in front of folks is often a really important galvanizing tool. So where people can look at the same number and they may have different stories about that number, but they can agree on this is our current state and this is maybe what we're working together to change. So think about where the power of data is. Think about where you can bring different people's perspectives into potential actions. And have to say, we haven't spoken about the importance of young people in this. We've talked about, presumably adults in the not-for-profit space and adults in the tech space, but where can the young people in our community who can particularly think in innovative ways come in and help us all create better communities?
Excellent, thank you. And thank you to our wonderful panel. And now on to our next segment. So there are many things to enjoy about collaboratives. One of my favorites is the solutions we get to the problems we send into the ecosystem. As you may recall, we asked Canada's tech ecosystem how they might address and solve data-related challenges, including, and Alison just alluded to these, data sharing, benchmarks and comparables, data literacy and capabilities, common approaches to data. Clearly, these are all interconnected and in some ways, different articulations of the same problem. We expected to see similarities in the solutions that were presented through our call for innovation. What we got back, and Chan mentioned this as well, was quite different. A very successful sourcing process. It turns out that there are many creative ways to address these challenges, and we're about to hear from some of the companies that submitted their solutions. Each company has just 5 minutes, which isn't much time, in which they're going to provide a very high-level look at what they can do. If one or more of these presentations leaves you hungry to know more, then fear not. All our founders will be present at our Founder Connect virtual networking segment, which will begin shortly after the end of our Founder Showcase, so you'll be able to connect with them there. But first, let's hear from our first founder, and Jessica is going to be fresh from our panel discussion coming back to present here. So let me introduce Tayet before we hand over the podium to Jessica. Tayet is a York region-based software company that was founded by Anton Anistan and Jessica Rowley. When they founded the company, they wanted to use technology to help small businesses become more efficient and to give them easier access to data. Soon they began to work with nonprofits and community organizations, which really ignited their fire as they were able to see the impact that their software had on these organizations. They are now helping nonprofit and government organizations across North America. To tell us more, here's Tyatt's co-founder and head of growth, Jessica Rawley. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Adam. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much to Communitech for allowing us to introduce our company to all of you. As Adam mentioned, my name is Jessica Rawley. I am one of the co-founders of Tyatt. Tyatt is a fully integrated data insights and business collaboration platform that is helping organizations increase efficiency. Tyatt was actually built out of a need that we had when we were scaling our business. Let me go to the next slide here. So in order to try and be organized and integrate processes, we started signing up for multiple different tools and tried to integrate them together. However, as we continued to scale, those integrations started to break and we started to lose insights into what was really happening with our business. We knew we had to do something different than what was currently out in the industry. So we actually decided to build something ourselves. Let's try that again. Here we go. So during that process, we went to our clients and we asked them what they were using and what their biggest challenges were. And almost all of them came back and said, listen, we're having the same challenge. So when we have all these different systems that we signed up for, we're really not quite sure what to do with them or how they all work together. So, whenever you're done building whatever you're building, sign us up. And that's still happening today. Many organizations today, they continue to sign up for multiple different applications to run their day-to-day operations, which results in broken processes, fragmented data, leading to a lack of insights, and then they get stuck in this constant cycle of integrations. So what we did with Tyatt is we built the modules from scratch so that they can speak to each other, allowing our users one place to log in, one place to collect the data in a secure location. The modules that make up Tyatt are modules that need to be used by every organization of every size in every industry. So it reduces the learning curve by using one system. Everything from your CRM to manage your day-to-day communications and to create custom pipelines to manage all the different processes that you have in your organization. Marketing tools such as email marketing, social media, texting, and landing pages. Scheduling, forms, surveys, and of course, billing. Having all this data in one place allows for organizations to have all of their data centralized in that secure location. And having all this data in one place then gives users the opportunity to gain better insights into the different areas of their organization. And then, of course, having all these insights allows users to improve efficiency across their organization and their team.
Sorry, Jessica, just 1 second. We can't see your presentation slides anymore. Would you be able to just re-share your deck?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, perfect.
Put it back in presentation mode here. Is that better?
Spot on. Thanks, Jessica.
Should I go back a few? All right, we'll start from where I left off here. Okay. All right, so the built-in dashboards and the reporting functionality is actually something that we're constantly adding to, as there are so many different types of reports that can be created in Tyatt, since Tyatt is that central place to collect all the data from all the different pulse points of your business. So when we launched Tyatt, we did not have nonprofit or government organizations in mind. We actually built it for startups and scaling companies similar to ours. However, then we worked with our first nonprofit client. Within their first campaign, we actually were able to help them drive in, more than 75% donations compared to the previous years. All because they were able to communicate and engage with donors with more targeted messaging. They were able to easily and securely collect more donations and automate follow-ups, including sending receipts that follow the CRA guidelines. So we saved their team time and we were able to help them increase donations. This here is just a few of the nonprofit organizations that we are working with. We also work with municipalities across Ontario and New Brunswick who use TIAT to share valuable insights and data with each municipality. So instead of having siloed data, TIAT now allows them to provide a better customer journey for all their community members province-wide by sharing relevant data with each other. You know, the power of data is so important. It's more important than ever, which is why we're on a mission to bring data insights into the hands of organizations more easily in one system in order to increase organizational efficiency. Oh, thank you.
Jessica, thank you so much for your presentation. If anyone in the audience would like to learn more about TIAT, email me at adam.straker@communitech.ca, and I'll be very glad to connect you with Jessica directly. Let me just share my screen so we can get our next, we can tee up our next speaker. So, okay. Our next presenter is Chilwell AI, a leader in advanced applied experience AI. Founded in 2015 by University of Waterloo alumnus Dr. Ian Knowles, Dr. John Callagher, and Michael Campanelli of McMaster, based on proprietary cognitive algorithms and using conversational AI, AV offers personalized communications, behavioral predictions, and deep learning analytics. Chilwell AI are the developers of Hello AV, AI-enabled voice intelligence. This virtual concierge utilizes Chilwell AI's proprietary cold start technology optimized for the nuances of a human-like interaction. Chilwell's human-aware AI technology enables communities to expand services and better meet the needs of the most vulnerable. To tell us more, here is Chilwell AI's CEO and co-founder, Michael Campanelli. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to share my screen, and I just want to make sure that it should work. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So first and foremost, before I start, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank everyone on the call, because it's not every day that we get a chance to meet with individuals whose careers are actually making a difference. So again, it's an honor to be able to present. Chilwell AI is a DeepMind next generation AI platform. And really, one of the things I'm very excited about is that it helps us, to really focus on activating the change that we may have always wanted to do, or the change that we may have, tried to do in expanding with respect to the programs that we wanted to talk about. So just briefly, Chilwell AI has developed the world's first digital human assistant that's powered by Experience AI. It's a virtual support that's available 24/7. And some of the things that are really powerful about it, when Adam was mentioning more, it's starting to become more and more human-like with respect to the customization for the not-for-profit, is that the first thing is that it has context. So it has conversations, it has context of where and how you are, and it also has the ability for emotional awareness, which starts the path down the ability to expand our potential for outreach to a 24/7 environment. This is something that's actually very, very important when you think of a region like Waterloo that is, very urban, very rural, very hard to sometimes get to, especially when it's after hours. And Adam had mentioned that Chilwell was founded and was brought together by a group of PhDs and master students that started to combine a number of areas of the human mind, related to sociology and behavioral sciences, to artificial intelligence and natural language processing. And our goal was to create something. I know we've had this conversation before about implementation. So it's to create something where you could have a fully managed outreach, concierge that could start without any data, that could start to engage and start to respond and start to reach the vulnerable youth, really on their terms, without you really having to do any setup, or without you having to with you fully respecting their privacy, because there's no authentication that actually needs to be done, unless you explicitly authorize it. And so it carries on this real human conversation. And one of the products that we're very excited to kind of bring to market, and this is a new area for us from our traditional areas working in smart cities and community engagement, is a personalized mental health triage. It's a custom assistant that's going to be able to direct you in seconds to the best support without you having to do all of the searching. And what it does is it because it's customized, it's going to allow you to complement your community outreach to how you envisioned and wanted to expand your community outreach. So it could be purely from a triage to support the best, parts of your service and how do I get to those, to an extension of an activation from, a survey or an outreach or a pulse, etc. And she can do this in seconds, and she's fully managed, but yet you're focusing more on what you do best, which is really focusing on the human side, the program outreach, and the youth that you know best. And the last thing she does is she'll have very deep analytics that now in real time, so we're not surveying in past, allows you to develop new insights on your programs, your performance, or how to create new programs that continue to improve and better the lives of the community, especially those youth that are hard to reach, with a technology that is speaking their language. And if you want to learn more about the solution or a demo, I'm very happy to take the time to show you, but I'm very excited by the ability for this technology to start to activate the change, that you might have thought was 20 years in the future. And this has changed now without having to really do any implementation, because we have a fully managed solution for everyone. And thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And I have to say, I am the hugest fan of your background. I really love it. If you would like to learn more about Chill AI, email me also at adam.straker@communitech.ca, and I'll be glad to connect you with Michael directly. XR Studios is a digital creative tech company whose mission is to develop extended reality technology that allows destinations all over the world to bring engaging cultural content to users on location. XR deepens the experience of exploring the world by providing art, history, and culture experiences to people who travel globally or locally. They work with local experts to create the most culturally authentic content they can, while providing entertaining storytelling to the world. To tell us more, here's XR Studios CEO, S. Pandey. S, over to you.
Thanks a lot. As always, Adam, you always have like a great and excited voice about all of these things. As you can imagine, we're not really a data company, so we fit in that box of out-of-the-box ideas that came out of this experience. And today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we can do with extended reality technology, and hopefully how it will relate to you. Let me go to the next slide. That would be nice. There we go. So I'll start by sharing a little bit of a story about how we went from being a VR arcade in a basement to an internationally renowned interactive and immersive studio. What we do today, and most importantly, what's in it for you. Before I move on to the next slide, I'm actually going to ask you to do something, because in the nature of being interactive, I'm going to ask you to just close your eyes and imagine a basement VR arcade. And I'll give you a couple seconds there. Just imagine what that looks like. And is this what you imagined when you thought about basement VR arcade? That's a rhetorical question. I assume no. If you did, good on you. So we were able to, we kind of started off thinking about that gaming place. We thought about the typical arcade. And then we realized we could do so much more for communities. We did things like help the city showcase their urban planning, service the arts community in the city. We used to install virtual reality hardware in long-term care homes where people had their first experience with VR and maybe went back to their childhood home for the first time in many, many years. And sort of that community focus is built into our DNA. As you can imagine, virtual reality is not particularly pandemic friendly. However, we were able to realize that the work that we were doing is highly applicable even for, you know, for this new medium of augmented reality. And augmented reality has this benefit of being able to tie people to their real world experience, something that VR doesn't necessarily do. So that's what we do today. We have an app where we can create these experiences. But you might look at this work and it's all well and good. It's artistic, it's cool, but what does it do for you? So this is a project that we did with Bank Street in Ottawa. And on the face of it, like I said, it's an artistic work. But for them, it represented an opportunity to bring thousands of people onto that street and support the local businesses that were suffering during the pandemic. So that's one example of an application. Another thing we did, we worked with Banting House in London, Ontario to tell the story of Sir Frederick Banting and his importance to that community. In St. Thomas, we took an approach of having both education and entertainment because we find that having this entertainment focus at the start brings people in and allows them to kind of absorb more greatly these experiences that are educational, like the one on the right here, which was a veterans focused experience. Some additional applications of the technology, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. We worked with Ontario Black History Society to create an audio tour in downtown Toronto, highlighting some of the most important places in Toronto with respect to Black history. We also imagine using this technology for newcomer onboarding. So for example, my cousin just came to Canada from India, and her family are having a hard time integrating because the way we integrate is by meeting people and going to events, things that aren't available during the pandemic. And we imagine that augmented reality technology has the capacity to kind of give people the experiences they need to get integrated. We've also worked with Western University and Unity to create an experience about basking sharks, where people can learn about ecology and the impacts to the environment. So those kinds of climate action and education experiences can also be built using our platform. If you find this kind of inspiring, if you find that if you can think of something else to do, feel free to reach out, or I'll also be in the Q&A. Thanks so much.
Thanks, S. If you'd like to learn more about XR Studios, email me at adam.straker@communitech.ca and I will connect you with S directly. GeoMate is a location intelligence company that creates HD mapping data for urban mobility. Using a combination of 20+ geospatial data sources and proprietary machine vision and machine learning algorithms, GeoMate is able to produce highly comprehensive, dynamic, scalable, and accurate digital twins of urban environments. They have an added focus on accessibility and walkability across cities. Using their technology, they're able to assess sidewalk and cycle networks for accessibility barriers. Their goal is to make Canada a more accessible place for everyone. To tell us more, here's GeoMate's Director of Communications, Robert McGregor. Robert, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Just give me a second here. Awesome. You guys all seeing that? In presenting mode. There we go. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Adam. And thanks to, all the speakers prior to me and everybody else that has tuned in today. It's great to meet everybody and learn so much great stuff about what's happening in the community. So yeah, we're Geomate. We're a tech company out of Communitech that has created a location intelligence platform for accessibility and walkability. So what we do is we leverage AI for sidewalk accessibility and walkability, and I'll get into the specifics of that in just a second. But essentially what we're trying to do is fill a gap that we found in mapping and travel data. Most of what we see is vehicle focused data and routing and walkability and travel stuff. And what we want to do is just ensure that human-centric forms of transportation like walking are important, because we saw that people who have maybe mobility disabilities, seniors, and youth were kind of being left behind because they have less access to private forms of transportation, and sidewalks are an important thing, and those two are often made for able-bodied folks who aren't necessarily dealing with kind of any mobility issues. So we want to help the kind of the other demographics that use sidewalks. How it works is we take a variety of raw data sources and geospatial data sources. So it could be aerial images and LiDAR scans, stuff like that. We process it through our in-house artificial intelligence machine that was created by our two co-founders during their PhD research. And our AI does two things that are really cool. It creates a digital twin of the city, mapping the transportation network, so sidewalks, cycle lanes, and roads. And it also extracts key vertical features from the networks. That can be anything from poles and decorative benches, things that could be along the sidewalk network inhibiting accessibility, as well as sidewalk metrics themselves. So the slope, width, and the surface quality are three things that we're focused on extracting the information. And then we process all that data through our analytics machine, and on the far side, we get HD maps. We do a couple different maps, but the one we're focusing on today is our accessibility and walkability maps. And so what we do is we take all the information I just mentioned, and we rate every sidewalk segment score for accessibility and walkability out of 1. So the closer you are to 1, the better. We look at a couple different key features of the sidewalk network. As I mentioned, the slope, width, and surface quality, as well as any other barriers to accessibility, like a lack of lighting. And then we also take into account access to public transportation to ensure that the network of transportation is well connected. In this example here, we have a 0.91 accessibility score on the sidewalk, which is great. We want to see as much green as possible. Red equals poor accessibility or no accessibility. So what we do, once we've kind of extracted all this key information from the sidewalk network, we actually are able to compare and contrast neighborhoods, regions, districts, wards across the board. So in this example here, we're looking at the city of Kitchener. I live somewhere in that red circle on the border of District 8 and 9. But as you can see here, we can map the kilometers of healthy sidewalk in each of these given districts. We can compare school zones, for instance, to see what school zones are the most walkable, which ones are the most accessible, and compare different neighborhoods and so on and so forth. And then that brings us to kind of our new a new thing we're trying to do in partnership with Grayson and his team at the Waterloo Region and through Communitech is making a tool for children and youth well-being using walkability and accessibility scores as a factor. So we're trying to increase connectivity within local communities by bettering sidewalk infrastructure so youth can readily walk our neighborhoods safely. We want to build a map highlighting points of interest for children and youth. So things like libraries, free Wi-Fi zones, green spaces, other points of interest that are important to youth. And then, yeah, we want to support neighborhoods in becoming safer and more walkable for everyone, whether it's seniors, youth, people with mobility disabilities, and everybody in between. We want to ensure that everybody has equal access to healthy, active living using our sidewalks. Thank you guys for that brief Geomate introduction. If you want to, you can reach out to me at robert.mcgregor@geomate.ca, and I'm happy to set up demos or, if you want more information, always happy to meet. But thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. And of course, if you would like to learn more about GeoMate, in addition to reaching out to Robert, you can also reach out to me and I'll be glad to make the connection. But either is just as effective. And now, Cinchi is the multi-award-winning DataWare platform that accelerates the delivery of new digital solutions without compromising control. It is used by organizations as diverse as TD Bank, the Mozilla Foundation, and the YMCA to eliminate data integration and unlock the problem-solving power of data collaboration. Cinchi can be hosted on-premise or private cloud and supports unlimited users and data sets. A single instance can power hundreds of data-centric solutions, for example, real-time solutions, analytics, automations, artificial intelligence, and machine learning training, which are delivered with unmatched efficiency while preserving the universal access controls set by data owners. To tell us more, here's Cinchi's CEO and co-founder, Dan Demers. Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Adam. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Are you able to see it okay?
Yes.
All right. So first of all, thanks for the opportunity. As Adam said, I'm Dan. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Cinchi. Cinchi is a DataWare platform, and DataWare is an entirely new paradigm that eliminates the idea of having to do integration to connect data across applications, across teams, across people, across organizations, and ultimately across the world. So I'm excited to introduce it to you for those of you who have not seen it before. But the first thing is, when you're learning about DataWare, is the fact that it is in fact a new paradigm. It's just basically inverting the model of how we think about information management. The traditional approach is that we have data, but it was created because of an application. And then the ability to reuse that data is an afterthought, which is why IT organizations need to spend over half of their budget doing integration. The new way of thinking is to recognize that the apps still have a place, but they need to be put in their place and they serve the data. The data is the actual asset that matters. If I'm using an iPhone 11 and I want to upgrade to a 13, I don't want to lose my data and have to recreate it. I just want to be able to pick up where I left off. If I have now my iPhone 13 and I want to flip over to an iPad, I want to just pick up where I left off. I don't want my data to be attached to an individual device. That's the paradigm shift where data becomes at the center. And the problem that we're ultimately solving with this new paradigm is integration is insanely expensive and is the result of the loss of control over data. Imagine if you could copy your money. It's the same problem because integration requires copies. So if you had one application, you have one integration. If you need 500 applications, you need to build 124,000 integrations. And that is a lot of money. And that's the problem. Across the globe, it's a $700 billion industry just on the technology costs alone. And that's getting more expensive every single year, which is why we've been missing this idea of DataWare. So we've had hardware, we've had software, and it's been that way for a very long time. But what DataWare does is it introduces a new layer that eats the complexity so that the software doesn't have to worry about that. So a common question is, how is DataWare different from data warehouses and data lakes and data mesh and data fabric and APIs and microservices? Don't these all solve the integration problem? They don't, and they're not even attempting to. They focus on enabling analytics or making it faster to create more applications and more silos and more integrations. They're very different than DataWare, which's goal is to make integration obsolete. And it does that by harnessing the power of collaboration, which is exactly how real intelligence works in nature. And if you're curious to learn more about that, strongly recommend just Google collaborative intelligence. It will probably reframe how you think about how intelligence works. That's what it did for me when I first learned about it. And the idea of collaboration is so powerful because it makes that copy-based integration approach obsolete. We've already seen it with files, file storage going to file sharing, going to file collaboration. If you've ever used Google Drive or Google Docs, you know what I'm talking about. What we're talking about with DataWare is doing the same, but for data and not just for files. So it's data collaboration. So think of it as the power grid for power is what DataWare is doing for data. And it's enabling the collaboration on data, where you have to imagine a world where people, like real humans, systems, can work together and collaborate on data without sacrificing autonomy and control over their data. And the way to get started is you're doing less integration with every project. So as you build new applications, you're not adding new silos. As you connect in your existing systems, you're connecting once and not having to redo that with every use case. You're getting universal interface. So, you know, the web browser for the web, this is the web browser for data. It's what we call the data browser. You can plug in existing visualization and reporting tools. You can use it to train and operationalize AI while respecting data privacy. For those organizations that already have a lake or warehouse, you can plug in and amplify and augment it. The data has a governance mechanism that respects the fact that people need to have control over their data, what some would call a data mesh architecture. And every individual data set has its own inbuilt controls. It's what we call autonomous data. So you get started by using it to simplify your next project. If this is the current reality of an organization and this is the future vision, well, how do you actually get there? Well, you get there by changing your projects where you're otherwise going to be buying technology, building technology, or integrating technology. And that's really where it is. And I'm realizing I'm running short on time. So I'm going to actually just skip over a couple slides here, but you can save a lot of money on integration if you compare the conventional approach versus the dataware approach. And we actually run our entire business on our own product. And I'll just give you like a 10-second tour of it, just so you can kind of see it come to life. But I'm in Cinchi in the data browser. What you're seeing is our company's brain. That's all of our knowledge, all the different data sets and how they're all connected. So for example, there's employees. I'm only seeing what I have access to see. I can only change what I have access to change. I can get a directory of basically all the knowledge in the entire organization, and I can search and discover, and I can not only find data sets, but I can go into it, where depending on my access, I can see or change or originate data, where I can interact with the data via different skins. So here it looks like Excel, but I can pop open a different skin that is a different layout on top of that data, where it allows me to see a 360 view of just a single employee, as an example. This could be a citizen. And again, everything that you're seeing is such that it doesn't create copies of data. It's an interface on top of data where the data is controlled at the cellular level, essentially guaranteeing that across many use cases. So there's obviously a lot more to the platform. And if you're interested to learn more, just check us out at cinchi.com.
Thanks, Dan. Amazing presentation. If you would like to learn more about Cinchi, email me also at adam.straker@communitech.ca, and I'll be glad to connect you with Dan and the rest of the team directly. Full disclosure, this is the third collaborative I've worked on here at Communitech, and I just can't get enough. Just as well, really, as the rubber is about to hit the road for Future of Cities 2022 in partnership with Rogers and City of Kitchener. The goal of which will be to connect advanced technologies with the complex problems facing cities. Engaging tech founders, enterprise executives, academics, and decision makers within Canadian municipalities, initial areas of focus include safety, sustainability, and livability, with an emphasis on mobility and infrastructure. We'll also explore the role of AI in cities and the critical matter of data governance and privacy. Over the course of a 12-month program, we will refine these themes in up to 30 challenges that will be presented to the innovation ecosystem, once again asking Canadian founders, how would you solve these challenges? We will then work closely with selected tech founders to connect them with municipalities with a view to exploring applicability, the potential for a paid pilot of their solutions. If you would like to learn more about this new initiative, please contact me at adam.straker@communitech.ca. Stay tuned for details of our official launch event taking place on March 3rd. Without giving too much away, I can say that one of our speakers has one of the all-time highest views on TED.com. So be there, there's going to be a real blockbuster. For now, in a couple of moments, we'll be having a 5-minute break before our unmissable virtual networking segment, your chance to connect with our speakers, founders, and each other. But first, I would like again to thank our wonderful speakers and our lead partner, Region of Waterloo, associate lead partner, WSIB Ontario, and contributor partners, City of Kitchener, Edgeworth Box, Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation, and United Way Waterloo Region Communities. For now, that's it from us. Thank you for joining. Your link to the networking room is in the chat. I look forward to seeing you shortly. Take care.